All right, welcome back, everybody. First Alert Meteorologist Bryan Bachman here on our first of two First Alert weather days as we, believe it or not, are still bracing for the worst from Helene. Let's go over the storm threats again here for you. Damaging winds going to be a moderate risk of those, especially as we start to head toward late tonight and tomorrow morning as the center of Helene passes by to the west of us and the worst of the storm comes in. Flooding, though, overwhelmingly remains the biggest issue we are going to face. We have already seen numerous flash flood warnings, many of which are still in effect as we speak. So that's going to be a major problem through Friday and likely into the weekend, possibly even well into next week for some of us, to be honest. Isolated tornado threat also continues into tonight, first part of tomorrow, and of course, with all of that combined, power outage is going to be an issue. Tornado watch in effect for Union, Lawrence, Greenwood, as well as Newberry counties. This until 8 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't mean we don't have the potential to see isolated tornadoes elsewhere. It's just that the risk is going to be greatest in those spots. So make sure you keep your phone audible overnight. That way, if a warning is issued for your area, you're able to hear that and head for shelter, especially in those spots. Now, looking at First Alert radar here right now, our heaviest rain for the moment moving through Hendersonville, Brevard, and headed up toward Asheville, Marion, and into parts of Rutherford and Polk and McDowell counties. All spots that have seen tremendous amounts of rain already over the last 48 hours and honestly need it the least at this point. Looking at the rest of First Alert radar, areas around Greenville, Spartanburg, Clemson, if anything, it's tapered off to just a light rain or some drizzle, but as you can see, that's not going to last. Our next band of heavier pockets of rain beginning to lift north out of the Midlands and out of central Georgia. Those will be moving in between about the 11 o'clock to midnight time frame. Still, though, we're well removed from the center of Helene, the eye just offshore of the Big Bend of Florida right now, the eye wall now well inland, approaching places like Tallahassee, Perry, if you're familiar with those parts of Florida, for example. Cedar Key, closer to here, is actually coming out of one of the interior rain bands, but they're bearing the brunt of a lot of the heaviest rains right now. You see these bands here, you call these spiral rain bands that are more toward the midsection of the storm, we can kind of say here. These bands tend to be the ones that are most likely to produce brief spin-up tornadoes, and in fact, we see a couple of tornado warnings in and around the Savannah area right now. It's going to be those bands as those start to approach our area, the rest of South and North Carolina overnight and into tomorrow morning, that'll feature that greatest risk of potentially producing a brief spin-up tornado. But as far as our rainfall for the rest of tonight, as we brace for the worst, we'll get a little bit of a break in the action, potentially between about midnight and 3 for some of us. But then you see here, 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, as the center of Helene is starting to brush by to the west of us, widespread torrential downpours only going to rapidly exacerbate whatever flooding we have going into tomorrow morning. The worst of it will then lift into the mountains by about 9 a.m. with some leftover rain bands lingering in parts of the upstate. Worst of it is over and done with once we get beyond lunchtime, but we will still likely have at least some scattered showers, especially in the mountains going into tomorrow afternoon and evening. An additional, through tomorrow night, on top of what we've already gotten, 6 to 10 more inches of rain likely in northern parts of the upstate, essentially north of I-85 and across most of western North Carolina, and an additional 3 to 6 inches of rain on top of all of this, already, of course, being the very rain-soaked ground. And last thing I want to mention here, too, the winds. Sustained winds are going to be picking up to anywhere between 40, maybe even 50 miles per hour as the worst of this settles in by tomorrow morning. But look at these gusts. For some of us, they'll be approaching hurricane force. 71-mile-per-hour gusts not out of the question in some parts of the mountains, Asheville, or anywhere in western North Carolina. And we could easily see those gusts topping over 60 miles per hour in the upstate tomorrow morning through the early part of tomorrow afternoon. All of that combining to produce the down tree and power outage threat. So again, I really just got to hunker down, wait for this thing to pass at this point. First Alert weather day in place for tomorrow. Predominantly morning, heavy rain and wind, then gradually improving in the afternoon. And then a nice, well-earned stretch of quiet weather Saturday through Thursday with plenty of sunshine, temps mostly in the 70s. And that heavy rain and wind will continue for more of the day in the mountains tomorrow, but also looking at least better, improving weather and drier as we head into the weekend.